Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Matthew White, Senior Business Development Manager at One Spatial, and I'll be your host for today's session. Before we begin, I've just got a few housekeeping items just like to go through with you. For the purposes of today's webinar, you've all been placed on mute. However, we do welcome your questions and comments, so please type these into the questions panel. We will address these at the end of today's webinar in the questions and answers session. And if we do not get a chance to answer your question, don't worry, we'll follow up with you after the webinar via email. And finally, today's webinar will be recorded and we will share a link with you for the webinar for you to view afterwards by email. I'm delighted that we have three speakers for you today. We've got Nicola Pearson from the Government and Industry Interoperability Group, and Nicola will give us a presentation about the asset information journey, setting the government policy context, the need for asset information interoperability, and evolving asset information management. Emma Walker from the Environment Agency will then follow Nicola, and Emma will give us a presentation about the Environment Agency's asset information management journey, with a specific focus on asset information assurance using One Spatial's One Integrate rules-based technology. And then after Emma, we'll have Adrian Porter from One Spatial. Adrian will give us a presentation about his asset information assurance experiences working with the Environment Agency. And then should there be time at the end, hopefully there will be, Nicola for questions and answers. Nicola and Emma and Adrian will then join me on screen to answer your questions at the end of the talks. So I would like to introduce our first presenter, Nicola Pearson, Engagement Lead at the Government and Industry Interoperability Group. Over to you, Nicola.
Thanks, Matt.
We can see your presentation.
Great, thank you. I'd like to introduce the Client Information Management Platform, why it's needed and what it delivers. And this is a piece of work of the Government and Industry Interoperability Group, which is funded by BEIS, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and managed through CPNI, the Centre for Protection for National Infrastructure. And I'd like to start by saying that the information management platform is a concept rather than a product. I'm Nicola Pearson. I'm an independent consultant leading engagement activities for the Government and Industry Interoperability Group, which is also referred to as the GIG. I've been working in this area since 2018, and a theme throughout my career has been the provision of information to make good decisions about built assets. I'd like to introduce a few of the people involved in the Government and Industry Interoperability Group. The people shown on this slide are referred to as champions of individual pieces of work that the GIG is delivering, and their role is similar to that of a non-executive director. They bring experience from other organisations, such as the Environment Agency, the Institute of Asset Management, and Crown Commercial Service, to name a few of them. The objective of the GIG is working with government and industry to improve their ability to exchange and use information securely, ensuring that that information is independent of the technologies used to deliver it. You can see that this is a quotation. It comes from the glossary, which is published on the CPNI website, and the address is given there. At this stage, I would like to emphasise that our focus is on information exchanges across the contract line, and really importantly, throughout the whole life of the asset. I'm going to refer to a couple of pieces of government policy just to show how they are pointing to capabilities delivered by the information management platform. And firstly, the construction playbook, which was revised last month. I'm sure a number of you will have seen that. And it refers to an information management platform as a standard interoperable approach for the secure exchange and use of data and information throughout the procurement and project lifecycle. And as I've already said, our interest is throughout the whole asset lifecycle. The TIP, the Transforming Infrastructure Performance Roadmap to 2030, has within its Annex B the information management mandate. And if you've not already looked at it, please do. It's only a couple of pages long and provides really important information. It is enforced throughout the 10-year life of the roadmap. And in clause 8, it provides the mandate. There are 7 sub-clauses within that, and Part E says that a client shall have a digital mechanism for defining its information requirements, and then procuring, receiving, assuring, and immutably storing via a system of record the information that it procures. And so an important thing is being introduced here. We're thinking about client activities that this digital mechanism is supporting. And here in these icons, we show the activities that we identify for clients to perform. There's 6 client activities, and then importantly, the third one, deliver, is the supply chain activity, but it needs a platform to enable that to happen on the client side. And I'd just like you to note the 4th activity, assure, because Emma will be talking about the work that the Environment Agency has been doing to ensure that data and information can be received and assured from their supply chain. And really importantly, clients need to ensure that information that is created or delivered is then able to flow through their internal processes and be used throughout the life of the asset. The construction playbook points us towards the requirements of the UK BIM framework. And this is an important set of standards, guidance, and other resources. And at its centre, you'll find ISO 19650. These clauses here come from Part 1, and they refer to the purpose of the common data environment. You'll also know that Part 1 has detailed information on how the common data environment will function. But my purpose here is to reference and highlight the common data environment because this is an important component of the information management platform. And as you'll see here, it performs an important function to manage and store shared information, but needs to have appropriate security for individuals and organisations. In 2018, CWB published a document on the Asset Information Model, Common Data Environment, the AIM-CDE. And if you're familiar with this document, you'll probably have seen this diagram. I'm going to start at the left of it, so don't worry if you haven't already seen it. And here we're emphasising that client organisations are frequently dealing with many concurrent designs, constructions, and managed assets. And there are many task teams involved in that. And clients need to ensure that their information requirements are passed effectively to all those teams of people and that they have a means of receiving delivered information. And the client information management platform forms a really important function here. But we also need to note that information needs to be absorbed into enterprise systems of the client organisation, not just be semi-detached from it. To take full advantage of that data and information, it needs to absorb it and combine it with information from other sources. And here, the thing that I'm emphasising is that this platform is a modular technology platform. At the top of the screen, you can see the activities that we've already identified: specify, procure, deliver, assure, store, present, and exploit. And at the bottom of the screen, you can see the technology modules which enable these activities to be performed. And the reason we have identified these capabilities in a modular form is that it makes it much simpler for a client organisation to gradually acquire this capability. It's also possible for it to repurpose technologies that it may already be using and assemble the capability for a number of different sources. They are also able to start delivering capability at an earlier stage by using this modular approach. Now, we've already referred to some of ISO 19650 here. I've got some clauses from parts 2 and 3 that refer to requirements of appointing parties. And in particular, I've highlighted halfway down the screen, review and accept the information model. And this requirement, as others on this page, don't explicitly require software, but to be able to execute this at scale, you do. And on the right-hand side of the screen, I've referred to individual modules that deliver this capability because, as I've said, the platform is comprised of a number of different modules, and Emma will talk about the automated rules reporting that they've been doing within the Environment Agency. I'd particularly like to highlight one of the tools that is available on our website. We've provided the impact assessment tool to enable client organisations to look at their current technologies and software and see the extent to which they are already delivering capabilities and to identify gaps and use this to provide a route map to implementing an information management platform or individual modules within it. And the tool works through individual modules, and you can see on the screen the way in which it breaks down the reference data library module into individual capabilities that need to be delivered. The information management platform enables client organisations to have controlled data delivery. It enables them to have a continuous thread through the specification, procurement, delivery and assurance of information. And also for that information to be immutably stored and that there is a system of record. It drives up data quality and data reliability and hence trust in that data. And it therefore becomes much more useful for other visualization and analysis activities within the organisation. And it also provides a foundation for the organisation to build digital models such as digital twins. I'm going to take you back to the TIP roadmap, and one of the images here, the image here is from that document. As we interact with the natural and built world, we need to capture information and data to support our decisions at project, asset, system and network level. And we need an information-focused approach to do so. And the client information management platform enables us to check that we have the data that we want and to check that it's timely and accurate and supports our best decisions, providing broadest insight and delivering value and social outcomes. And at the top of the diagram, you can see the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as the intended outcomes from this system of systems. And finally, I'd like to point you towards our published resources. They're on the CPNI Information Interoperability web pages. And there you can find step-by-step guidance on implementing an information management platform. There are also contract clauses to support the procurement of interoperable information, and also a case study of the Environment Agency's modular technology approach. So please do take a look. But I'm now going to hand over and you'll hear from Emma.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Thank you for that presentation. I would now like to introduce our second presenter, Emma Walker, Emma's a Flood and Coastal Risk Management Senior Advisor, responsible for digital asset and data information at the Environment Agency. So over to you, Emma, and we can see your presentation.
Brilliant, thank you. I am Emma Walker. I've worked for the Environment Agency in flood and coastal risk management for 15 years now, initially in operational roles like flood incident management and asset management, but more recently moved into digital asset data and information role. So for the past 6 years, my particular focus has been using data standards to help us achieve more digital ways of working and become more effective and efficient asset managers. So just talk a little bit about our journey so far. The Environment Agency has approximately 240,000 flood and coastal risk management assets in its inventory, of which about 76,000 are maintained by us. And these are assets such as flood walls and embankments, flood storage areas, other structures like control gates and pumping stations, quite a wide variety. We also currently have around 900 active capital flood and coastal risk management projects, and £5.2 billion worth of funding has been committed for flood and coastal scheme construction between 2021 and 2027. So we want to make sure that we are maximising our efficiency and effectiveness, and we want to be world-class asset managers. We want to do things better, smarter, faster, and make better informed decisions. And we understand that data underpins our success in doing this. And so we have been on this data journey for many years now. Key to this and the principle of BIM is recognising that when we buy an asset, we're not just buying the physical asset, we also need all of the information about that asset to be able to manage it for its life cycle. So what is the asset? What are its key features? How should it be maintained and operated? What does it look like? Where is it specifically? We want to bridge the information gap between capital projects and operations, and avoid some of the problems of data not being available for a long time after a project completes, potentially when it's too late to fix any issues with that data. And we want that information that's provided to be readily accessible, reliable, and in a format that helps us make better informed decisions, not only at a local level, but across our asset portfolio. And to do that effectively, we need to standardise to an extent the data and information we obtain about assets. This diagram loosely outlines the process we've been building to help overcome these issues, and it aligns roughly to the stages that Nicola shared before. So starting with specifying and procuring, then delivering, and the assurance of data, and then the ongoing storage and use of that data. And so I'll briefly cover some of these aspects before focusing on assurance. One of the first things we did on our journey to procuring better information was to define our requirements in the form of employers' information requirements. And this establishes ways of working for suppliers, informs them of our data and information requirements, and explains how we're applying ISO 19650 standards. It's generic across the framework with the ability to tailor beyond this. We've also put in place CAD and object standards, which define how CAD drawings and model objects are formatted at each stage of development. And data cards are used to present model data in a two-dimensional deliverable. Another precursor to assurance is the data requirements library. It's a very important one. This is an online publicly accessible library which details the classification structure, terminology and definitions that the Environment Agency uses to categorise its assets. And it also specifies the attributes of data that we require for each asset type, in what format and when we need it. And the data requirements library is machine readable and can be connected to through an API. And it's not only the specification of requirements to suppliers providing this data, but it also acts as a standard for our internal IT systems and data holdings, so that it makes data easier to join up, to analyse, to reuse, and more reliable for reporting. So on to procuring and delivering. At the start of a project, an information delivery plan is produced using the IDP tool, which details and classifies data and information to be delivered on a project at each gateway. It covers corporate, project and asset information, and the delivery format is specified. And this IDP then forms part of that contract with the supplier. Then ahead of the full business case, suppliers use the data requirements library to break down and categorise the proposed scheme that is being delivered into assets and elements as per the data requirements library. And this is going to be done in collaboration with local asset performance teams, because it forms the basis of how the data is then supplied and structured. There's a common data environment where for each stage of a project, the supplier uploads all the required documents specified in the IDP, and also the file of data that is structured, so the geocobi file it's referred to. And so all the data that's required at a particular stage of a project as specified in the data requirements library. There's the example of the structured data there and the geocobi file and what it looks like. When it comes to the assurance part, so the data rules and visualization service, or DRV, is what assures and verifies the data that is supplied and is what we develop with OneSpatial. And when the geocobi file of structured asset data is uploaded into the CDE, the Common Data Environment, it triggers this service, the DRV, to pick up the file and apply its automated rules checking. It's an automated rules-based service because we don't want to burden staff with the job of checking lines of data. So take a lot of resource multiplied over all of the projects. We want to automate as much as possible. And in establishing the DRV, 8 different pots of rules were defined, which focus on checking data against different standards and sources. So just briefly, the EIR pot, it's sort of checking rules that they're checking against the file that was submitted is in accordance with the employer's information requirements and ISO 19650 standards. The IDP rules are checking the content of the information delivery plan, which profiles the files that are being exchanged. Then the CDE rules are checking that files are present in the CDE and have been supplied as required. The data requirements library, or the DRL, is rules that are checking against the data against the specified requirements in the data requirements library. We've also then got rules checking that any existing assets that are referenced are matching valid assets that are published in our data service platform map, and rules checking that any project references or information is valid against one of our project systems, AIMS PD. And then there are spatial rules checking spatial data conforms to our spatial requirements, and technical rules checking technical data about the design meets technical and engineering requirements. At the moment, the majority of rules that we've defined focus on making sure that we have data in the right format and validation parameters to be able to be ingested into our internal systems. But in future, we see that we will be moving to expand these rules into more of the area of engineering standards in that sort of technical pot, according to business rules that we're yet to define. And we'll be thinking in future about how we can assure that asset data is true to life as well. And once the process has run and the rules have been applied, the supplier gets a verification report which tells them which rules have passed or failed, and the data cannot be accepted by the Environment Agency unless the rules pass or a concession is agreed with the employer information manager. By verifying the data at the point of handover, we're making sure that the data provided meets our needs, because if it doesn't, at this point it's more easily rectified than further down the line. And a lot of careful work went into ensuring the rules worked as intended. We found it really beneficial to work collaboratively with One Spatial. That collaboration between somebody who really understands the technical aspects of the solution and rule writing, with somebody who really understands the business requirements and what exactly the rules need to be checking and what are allowable values or not, particularly in the testing of those rules. And as I mentioned, the rules will need ongoing maintenance and management as business requirements change and as our understanding matures, so there needs to be resource available for this. So once data is assured and accepted as published, it's automatically loaded into the data store where it's available for onward use. And we're currently working on partially automating the ingest of data from DRV into our asset inventory. And the fact that we have consistent standards for data and systems should make this easier, but it's still highlighting the importance of standardizing how we do things. We're used to people knowing what to do, relying on people knowing what to do, but in reality, they all do it slightly differently. So it's a challenge defining rules so that a machine can do the work. But that's the next challenge. And this will sort of feed back then into the data requirements library and the specification so that requirements are updated. And it's a continual feedback loop. We're also working on Power BI dashboard to visualize the data from DRV and are surfacing the data, spatial data particularly, but also the documents and other data in our internal GIS systems so that we can use it effectively and make better informed decisions. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, and there's obviously a lot more detail behind it, but I hope you found it useful or interesting to hear what we've been doing, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Emma. Fantastic presentation. So thank you. Now I'd like to introduce our third presenter. I'd like to introduce you to Adrian Porter. Adrian is a managing consultant at One Spatial. So I'll now hand over to Adrian, and we can see your slides.
Cool. So just having a little bit of fun with my screen. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today. Following on from the talks we've already seen today, I'll be giving sort of a walkthrough of the experience that One Spatial had in doing the DRV project and actually using the information management platform. So just as a brief introduction to myself, my name is Adrian Porter. I'm a managing consultant at One Spatial. I've been working within the geospatial information management space since around 2001, and my roles on the DRV project were to look at was solution design and the technical lead for the delivery of the project and subsequent service. Again, referencing the information management platform, we could see from our early engagements with the Environment Agency that using this platform and the information around it was key to this delivery. I won't be going into too much detail around this, as this has already been covered off in Nicola's presentation. But the steps that we were mainly interested in looking at or covered off was around the assurance side of things, and to some degree storage, leading into elements of presentation and exploitation. Again, just as an overview of the project or the service itself, the data stores, rules and visualization, I won't go into too much detail, as Emma covered this off in excellent detail in her presentation. But again, just to give an idea that this was a project around validating, verifying information receiving from suppliers to give that confidence and assurance that the quality was there before it was being delivered into a repository information for use by the business in its own processes. As part of that, some of the tools and sort of themes that I'll be talking about are elements that were linked through to the information management platform and some of the BIM framework standards and sort of challenges that we need to deal with. So one of the big things that came out of part of the requirements was the need to integrate with enterprise systems and specifically existing systems, utilizing and reusing existing stacks and information technology that was already there. So this included the A-Site, which was Environment Agency's common data environment, their content management system. The DRL, which I'll talk about a little bit later, pre-existing rules, cataloging and information, asset management systems, data services platform, and incumbent softwares already, such as Azure platform, also using the Azure SQL database, and other visualization and business intelligence tools such as Power BI. With regards to ideas around specification, the idea of rules coverage. So as we engaged with EA and worked with EA as part of understanding what their requirements are, obviously the rules and the assurance around the business information was key. And one of the things that we could see, and one of the challenges was we could see there was a very wide range of sources of rules, which I kind of listed at the bottom, and I think Emma sort of covered off again in her talk. We had information coming from information management platform, which is information about what the sort of setting the standards upon delivery, the information coming from the DRL and also from the common data environment. So again, there was quite a wide range of tools which all needed their own specific sort of product experts for us to work with and collaborate with to distill down that information. Some of it digitally provided in a structured manner, and other had to be involved in interpretation. One of the key things we needed to get out with this collaboration was this idea of an unambiguous definition of the information. So we could clearly define what that business rule was. We had, if we like, a conceptual definition of what the rule is and how we could interpret that, if you like, into a physical implementation within software. So it was key as part of that engagement to have clear understanding, interpretation, and then ultimately acceptance by the business through our sort of collaborative process to ensure that the rules that we were building met their requirements. And as we said, one of the key things was around the rules and it was very much at the beginning of the project, was that the rules had to have context with data. So the idea of versioning and revision management rules was key to their development. So we often commonly deal with the idea of versioning, where we would take a rule and we would version individuals, but in this case we were dealing with this as a rule set level. So as there was a change, the whole set of rules of version. But this, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but it was more about the idea that we can keep this intrinsically linked to a point in time. Every day or point in time, we got a clear understanding of what rules are relevant at that particular moment. So again, one of the key ideas and sort of concepts is the idea of interoperability. And one of the key tools or pieces of data that we were using as the transmittal data format was the COBE or GeoCOBE sort of format of data. Again, COBE is a common sort of standard now format used for the transfer specifically of BIM information, although we would sort of clearly see from our experiences on this project that it certainly has no need to be limited to this. And the GeoCOBE element was really an extension, an expansion of this to allow spatial geographic information, location information to be stored alongside this for processing through. And again, just to give a view of the COBE data itself, as we can see, it's a very deconstructed way of storing information, what we almost might call a pivoted data structure from ourselves, that rather than seeing layers of data, columns across, we've effectively pivoted this around. So we are effectively looking here at attributes, and we can store effectively data in a structured but very agnostic way. This makes it a very open format, effectively allowing us to transfer and transmit effectively data without really any limitations on its schema and structure. So this very different approach, we must admit, from using in other kinds of data transformation work and mapping and sort of projects we might see, but we actually came to find it incredibly useful as part of this project. So the tools for the job we use, as I said, very much looking at tools that are already in place with the Environment Agency. So one integrate is one spatials tool, our data assurance tool, which is very much has a rule-based approach as its heart for providing structured rule-based assurance of data, given and allowing us to provide levels of confidence as to the quality of that data. The other key tool for our platform was FME, which we used as part of our data integration platform, allowing us to connect to a wide variety of data sources and very much using it as an orchestration tool. Very much a kind of dream team for us of collaborative tools working together to get the best out of both of them. Another common one is we've mentioned, which is very sort of key to the BIM frameworks and some of the information management platform concepts, is the use of a CDE and the CDE workflow. In this case, this was A-Site, which is EA's cloud-based collaboration system. Again, an immutable source, permanent storage of data. And it was our key point for receiving information into DRV and a way for providing information back. And again, worth mentioning that the CDE itself had two sides, the supplier side, the SCD, where the supplier could upload and supply information to EA, and then the employer side where they could see this information and receive information back to the supplier. Very much that sort of interaction, that place where the customer and supplier can interact with each other. Again, just to give an idea of the integration between the applications, said we have our dream team here of FME and One Integrate, and obviously not forgetting the data repository elements of this, the data store, which in this case was EA's existing software or existing platform, which was the Azure SQL database environment. And this just gives quite a high level understanding of how we would interact and connect in and communicate with different elements of the application and different data sources. Again, this is another little overview diagram. Just before I dive into a bit more detail, talking about the assurance process within the CDE workflow. And just to give a high level run through, we can see that we've got this idea of data being published and updated onto a site for what we are checking a site, polling it, looking to receive information into the DRV. This is then processing through the verification or assurance stage, where we are verifying and then understanding how much does the data conform to the rules that we understand. This then feeds into the idea of reporting, where we can report back to the supplier and to EA themselves via the CDE as to what is the level of conformance, what is the quality of this data. And if based upon certain rules and gate checks here, we can then proceed through to a load phase, through to storage, where we can store data in a default structure ready for presentation and exploitation if needed. Again, very much this idea of a golden thread of information running through, all for audited and keep a trail of what we're doing, and also providing this idea of a clear workflow for data. Out of the insurance, one of the key things leading in from the capture of rules was this idea that we commonly use in One Integrate is the concept of a rules catalogue. And it was this idea of being able to clearly structure the definitions of the rules. We then used this as an engagement tool to work with EA and their subject matter experts to enable us to clearly and unambiguously note down the definitions of the rules. This can then be shared with our build team, our rule writers development team, to then physically implement those rules. And we found this tool very useful in a way that we can use this both as a clear definition of what rules are and also as a way that we can collaborate with EA. And ultimately, this is a tool that the rule catalog itself actually becomes a asset of the DRV. It is actually a part of the application where we actually plug it into the system, and we then use that as a way to actually control configuration for the assurance process and also integrate it into the reporting elements itself. Very much a configuration driven process. Again, now looking at insurance, sort of looking more about our particular tools we used. What our approach to developing this was that One Integrate fund our own data assurance software is very much built around this idea of structured rule to manage its own internal content management, allowing clear, easily understandable storage of rules, which we felt very much aligned and fitted into the requirements of the DRV service project. Again, dealing as we write rules, it's a UI-driven rule building and codeless rule writing. So very much we could expand our usage and very much allow in the future for EA themselves to start to become self-sufficient, to be writing their own rules as they feel fit to expand it as needed. And very much the rules are written in data context. So very much it is very essential that the rules are written in context with the data itself, providing clear understanding of the rules. And in some cases, we very much use these descriptions and information of the rules as an engagement tool in their own right to clearly help us to understand the rule definitions during testing. And built also into Integrate also is a really useful summarization that we can, as we write, we can summarize into a human readable descriptive definition of the rules, again providing these bite-sized chunks of clear information to allow us to ensure that we're clearly providing the rule definitions and to ensure that we're providing what's needed. Again, leading on to insurance through configuration-driven rules. We mentioned earlier the DRL, the Data Requirements Library, which again is a clear storage of the definition of the assets that EA are supplying. I said this public available information, and key to this idea was the API machine readable integration with this. So we were able to, as part of our rule writing, plug into this and then use this as a way to drive rule writing through configuration. And again, this is how we implemented this again with one integrate rule writing, that we could integrate with the DRL API. The rules were very much driven from the data itself. So this allows us to write rules in context with the data and effectively get to a point where we can almost have automated rule writing, that as the underlying DRL revisions and raw asset information is updated, then this automatically feeds in to the rules themselves, and effectively the data is starting to drive the insurance. So we're not having to do constant rule maintenance as data changes over time. Again, moving now into the idea of our experience with writing rules with Giacobbe itself. Again, very different way of thinking. We have this idea of a schema agnostic approach, which from ourselves, we found quite challenging. Again, we are very much used to looking at data through layers information, but in this case, we actually found this started to work to our advantage. We were able to write much more generic rules by looking at information such as when this attribute is created by, for example, then we must ensure it is not null. So as we learn to understand data, is what we have to do with most projects, we then start to understand how to work the rules. And in many cases, we found this to be very advantageous. And as new assets may be transferred through the process, in many ways, this means that the maintenance levels go down because these rules can automatically be applied to them. Again, finally, looking at sort of towards the end of this workflow, the idea of reporting, again, very much we took an approach of a very granular level of approaching our rule. The way we report here was very much almost to the cell level, where as we received information, we were able to very clearly indicate every occurrence or every instance of a non-conformance, very clearly identifying this tool. Identifying the non-conformances with the rules. Again, if you refer back to the earlier workflow, the idea is as these are automatically generated, they are fed back into the CD workflow process, and then in themselves can become a tool that can be used by the supplier and EA as a way of determining what issues are and what issues need to be addressed. And then moving on finally into our ideas around the linking back to the information management platform with storage. We very much, again, were key using the existing technology of Azure SQL database. Our storage approach here was actually to mimic the COBE model itself, providing data in agnostic storage, because the idea was this was to become a storage mechanism, this immutable container of data. And then as we started to then build on this information, this could start to be presented, exploited by the EA using their GIS business intelligence as they start to build up their data. So what were our takeaways from the project? We found the effort that EA had put in under their specification with the DRL really started to show significant payoff with rule writing and expansion. Being able to plug into this, whilst it certainly wasn't trivial to do, once we got this working, you can see the benefit that as the data changes, the configuration changes, we are reducing the amount, or effectively eliminating the amount of maintenance we need, and as data changes, the rules are responding to that. Again, the agnostic rule writing we found scalable, transferable to new assets. As new assets were being introduced, the need to then add new additional rules or modify them was not needed because of this agnostic approach to the way the data was supplied to it. We do feel that this, again, whilst this is very much aimed as the idea of BIM data, we do think we can see this being expanded to other information types and industries. We are, whilst that's what it's aimed, we could see different information being supplied in this format if that's needed. And indeed, as part of how we see the DRV project changing, it could be the case that other information is supplied, both spatial and non-spatially. One of the challenges we found was what we might call format personalities, the challenges with different formats. As we showed earlier, the chosen method to supply the COBE, GeoCOBE data was Excel. Again, a very open format, easy to work with and use, but in itself has its own challenges, limitations on the amount of information that cells can provide, and also the way that Excel formats data, that often what you see on the screen is maybe not what the data is. These things can be managed through rules and authentication, but it was certainly something that we had to become very acutely aware of. And the other thing just to consider is, if you're considering working with COBE or GeoCOBE, is that it is a structure and format in its own right. So that often requires a need or its own form of management, and if you like, its own form of interoperability to move from your native data into the GeoCOBE format itself. So with that, thank you very much for your talk. I hope you found that interesting, and I'll hand back over to Matt.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Can I just ask Nicola and Emma just to join me on the questions and answers session for the bit of time we've got left before we wrap up. So I'd like to ask a question firstly to Nicola. I think something that often comes up in conversations is, what is the difference between a common data environment and the information management platform?
Thanks, Matt. The common data environment is one of the components within the information management platform. So there's an immutable container store, and that refers to sort of some of the capabilities required for the common data environment. And obviously, you need to be sort of following the naming conventions and the rules around sort of metadata that you'll find in the standard for that.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Yeah, great answer. Hopefully that's hopefully clarified it. Certainly clarified it for me. Emma, yeah, just like to ask you a good question here. A great presentation, by the way. We've heard that from people. How do you expect rules to change over time, and how do you think you might manage those rules going forward?
Yes, so that is something that we do expect to happen. As I mentioned, there will be a need to expand the rules that we've got available as and when we sort of define those within the business and those requirements. We will be able to add rules into the rule catalogue and develop those. We've got a certain ability to do some of that configuration ourselves as well. So, and as Adrian sort of mentioned, the rules have been written in such a way that they sort of rely on the data requirements library for the parameters of those rules. So hopefully we wouldn't need to change too much as and when things change in the data requirements library. But there will be things probably where we change. If we change something more structural to do with the data requirements library, then that would have an impact on those, and we do, yeah. So some of those changes we might be able to make ourselves through configuration, or we might need to look at something more substantial. And the rule catalogue, as Adrian mentioned, is versioned, so that we, as and when we do make changes to those rules or introduce new rules, they are a versioned set. So projects that were started before those rules came in, obviously they weren't contractually obliged to deliver to those new requirements. So that's part of the reason why we have the versioning of the rule sets as well.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks for answering that question. Got a question here, I think, for Adrian. I think just thinking about time. If anyone has got a question they want to pop up in the box, in the question box, please do. Adrian, You mentioned COBE and GeoCOBE. What's your thoughts on the use of COBE as a potential application outside of asset information and BIM data?
I mean, from a very simplistic thinking, you could in theory store any information you want in there. I mean, within the DRV, we were storing asset information, which, crudely is, attributes and geometry, which is no real different to anything else. But along with that, there was metadata information about documents that were stored on the CDE, and other information around supplied information that needed to be, so very much, which we didn't really cover a lot, that when people would send an update, it wouldn't just be a GeoCOBE file, there'd be a large number of other files associated with it, CAD drawings, PDFs, other documents themselves. And so really, when you look at it as a way of just transmitting data, which is obviously the transmittal format is very much as it's described, I could certainly see the ways that that COBE format could be used as a way of supplying information, especially when we work in other projects where we can see that we need to sort of do this form of customer assurance portals, if you like. And there could be large volumes of data, possibly thousands of assets, type definitions, and even types of, where trying to account for every variation. And if I can just one of the interesting things about with EA's asset data is that the GRL was very good, that whilst you might have a particular asset like an embankment, its structure changes with the stage of the project as well. So even over a life cycle, you can have schemas change. So this kind of agnostic approach we felt was very good way of being able to transmit lots of data, but also from our benefit, we could start to write quite generic rules, which could then effectively expand as the data expands. So whether that's not what it's intended for, but you could certainly see that it could have those usages as well.
Right, I think we've got time for one more question. I think it's so someone's put excellent presentations from everyone. With regards to the Environment Agency data, this used to be described as a data catalog description. So this is incredibly useful to external users of the data via the DEFRA data services. I think this might be one for you, Emma, via the data services platform. Was this part of the Environment Agency and One Spatial project?
You assume they're referring to the data requirements library?
Yeah, it used to be referred to as the data catalog description, and just saying whether with regards to the EA data, was the data services, the DEFRA data services platform, part of the project that we were working on?
Yes. So the data requirements library is on the data services platform. I think it can also, it also sits alongside where we publish the asset data. So again, those sort of definitions of the asset types and element types and the attributes and information is there alongside the published data as well. So it does provide that sort of explanation as to what we mean by the different fields of data that are published.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Emma. Okay, I'm just conscious of time. We've got a couple of minutes to go, so it just gives us enough time to wrap up. So I'd just like to say thank you very much to Emma, Nicola, and Adrian. I'll just put up a couple slides just for us to finish off. Hopefully, I'd say that, and I'll get this. Okay, right, so you can just see my screen just there. So I would just like to kind of firstly thank everyone in our audience for joining us today. It's very much appreciated. I'd like to thank our presenters, Nicola, Emma, and Adrian. We hope that you've taken something away from today's webinar. So we've certainly seen, as organisations embrace digital and exchange asset information from data owners and supply chains, we've heard about how we need to take a more of a holistic approach to asset information management. And I think we've certainly seen that asset data from data owners and supply chains needs to be sorted, arranged, presented visually, and made actionable. If you'd like to continue the conversation about asset information assurance, then One Spatial would be delighted to hear from you. And I'd just like to a bit of promotion, if that's okay with everyone. Well, I'm in control, so I'm gonna show this final slide, which is one final announcement, is that before we end today's webinar, is that One Spatial would like to invite you to our 6th annual Smarter Data, Smarter World conference taking place on the 10th of November at the Royal Institution, London, and speakers include National Highways, Geospatial Commission and Crossrail. So thank you very much for joining us today, and it now leaves me just to say goodbye from me and goodbye from our speakers today. Thank you very much.